Hello everyone, I hope you are well at home, and welcome today to our session on GCSE citizenship. We're going to be covering the issue of local government. Much of that stuff we have done in our lessons over the past few months before we left school and before the lockdown period. So it's a recap on learning, but also trying to connect it to some of the learning that you've done early on in the year. Also the sort of stuff that you've done in previous years as part of your citizenship studies course. Apologies for my hair, like many of you guys, it is growing. This is 2 months of no haircut, so it is a bit of a mess. I hope you are all doing well and are fine at home. Today, you'll need a pen and a paper. My suggestion is that you do not have a pen and a paper at the moment, that you pause this video now and you go and get a pen and a paper, because that will help you today in the activities that we're going to do as part of this little session online. One other thing to say is the stuff that we're going to be covering now is going to be linked to a quiz on Show My Homework that we're going to be talking about in a short while. So watching this and doing some of the activities will help you cover the quiz on Show My Homework. So I'm going to run you through our session today on local government. Feel free to pause it at any point if you need to go away and you need to restart it at any point. So what you should see at the moment on your screen is a picture. And it's a picture of the Peace Gardens, and there is a building. And it's a lovely day with a blue sky. It's before our lockdown. There's many people there, and they're clearly not socially distancing. That couldn't happen at the moment. But there are 3 questions. Well, 2 questions and 1 extension. And the first one says, what is the building in this photo? So on your sheet of paper, I'd like to say, what is the building in the photo? Number 2, what usually takes place there? And our extension question is, well, how is that linked to democracy? We said, didn't we, in previous years and earlier on this year, that democracy was about power to the people. It was that Greek word there. So your job is to pause this video and just write down some answers to questions 1 and 2 and the extension. So pause the video now. So I'm presuming that you paused the video and that you have now written down some of the answers to that question. And we're going to go over some of the answers now. So in terms of the answers that we're talking about, we're saying, okay, so what is the building in the photo? Well, the building in the photo, as you'll know, is Sheffield Town Hall. It's on Pinstone Street in the city centre of Sheffield. And what takes place there? Well, we know that it's the home of Sheffield City Council. That's our local government, very distinct from central government in London and our legislature, where laws are made. Very different. It's where local decisions happen. And we know that it's linked to democracy because it's the building where our elected representatives make democratic decisions about our city in Sheffield. So what I'd now like you to do is I'd like you to use that pen and paper that you got earlier, and I'd like you to subdivide your sheet of paper into 2 different distinct halves. What you can see on the screen is one of the halves says central government and the legislature, and legislature is just a posh and fancy way of saying parliament. Our legislature in the UK is called Parliament, but in the United States it'd be called Congress, for example. And on the other side of your sheet of paper, I'd like you to say local government. And obviously local government for us is Sheffield City Council. I don't want to complicate it too much here. There can be different types of local government. For example, there's Sheffield City Council that makes a lot of decisions locally. There's also Bradfield Parish Council that makes a small number of decisions if you live in that parish council area as well. But we're not going to complicate that here today. We're just going to learn about the distinction between central government and the legislature down in Parliament, down in Westminster in London, and also local government there. So what I want you to do is subdivide the page so that you can do the next activity that we're going to do now. Now, as you'll see, each one of these words or sentences are numbered, and there are 15 of them. What I'd like you to do is put the number. So, for example, one ward either into the side that represents local government, that represents local government, or whether it represents central government and the legislature, parliament. So I want you to decide whether the number should go on one side of the table or the other. I'm just going to make it full screen now so that you can pause the video and that you can do this yourself. So please do pause the video now to do the task. So I'm presuming that people have paused the video, and that means that you've now done the task. You've looked at all 15 of those words or sentences, and you put them on either side of your table. I'm just going to run you through some of the answers to this. Now, some of the answers to this, you can see the ones that represent local government or local democracy on the side of your table are in green, and the ones that represent central government and the legislature in black. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you through one side of the table and the other. First one I'm going to read you through and talk you through is about local government, and that's the thing that's in green on your screen at the moment. So a ward is an area in Sheffield. There are 28 wards in Sheffield. Each are represented by a local councillor in the town hall. Each ward has 3 local councillors. Local decisions are made by these local councillors that meet in the town hall. That role is a part-time role where usually people are either retired or have other jobs as well. It currently has a Labour majority, so there are more councillors represented by the Labour Party than any other political party. That means they run Sheffield City Council at the moment. It might be in other years that's very different, and in the past we've had local councils that have been run by the Liberal Democrats over recent years, at least in my lifetime as well. So these things can change because, of course, councillors are elected, and those elections happen every few years. The ones in black are representative of central government or the legislature, things that happen in London and in a certain area of London called Westminster, in the heart of central London. So we're saying that MPs are elected in office, is what we would say, for a period of up to 5 years. But sometimes those general elections can take place less than 5 years, in less than 5 year intervals, but no longer than 5 years. Each member of parliament is elected by their constituents in constituencies. There are 650 constituencies across the country, and MPs go down from their constituencies to represent their constituents in the House of Commons, which is in Westminster. Now, when you're doing your exam, you won't make the mistake that I've done here and said the House of Commons without a capital letter. Commons should be a capital letter. We know that's in Westminster. They make national decisions. They actually make laws that apply to each and every one of us. Like I've said before, there are 650 members of parliament in the country, and there are 5 members of parliament that represent Sheffield. Each represent a different constituency. For example, constituencies in that many of you guys will be from are places like Sheffield, Hillsborough, Brightside, Sheffield, Hallam, and also Penistone and Stocksbridge constituency, which is a constituency that goes across both Sheffield and Barnsley. Currently, there's a Conservative majority government. That's because there are more MPs in Parliament than any other political persuasion. Apologies, I should say really there that there are currently more Conservative MPs in Parliament than any other political party. So therefore, they're able to form an administration. They're able to form a government. Being an MP is a full-time job, and it's paid accordingly as well. Yeah, MPs are quite well paid. They're paid probably in line, or maybe a little bit less than a head teacher of a large secondary school these days, about £70,000. Now we've done that activity, I'm going to run you through some key summaries about local government. At the end of this, you can pause it to make a note of it yourself, or you can pause it simply to have a little look if we've been going over it too quickly. So we know from what we've said already that Sheffield City Council is local government in our area in Sheffield. Councillors are people who are elected to make decisions at a local level, and they sit on the council. Councils meet on a regular basis, at least once a month, to discuss local issues in the town hall. Councils represent a ward, and there are 3 councillors per ward. An award is an area that a councillor represents. And although local councillors aren't paid a salary, they get an allowance rather than a wage, and take on this role in addition to the jobs that they have already. And that's really important, because actually we need to make sure that local councillors are representative of the rest of the population, so that they understand what it's like to go to work, to study, to travel on local transport, public transport, to be sat in a car in a traffic jam, to kind of go to the local leisure centre and see how great it is, or to see how there might be issues in it, for example. The next thing I want you to do with your sheet of paper is I'd like you to just put a quick title, and the title should be "What Council Services are shown in each photo." So what council services are shown in each of these photos? And I'm going to ask you in a second to make sure that you jot down these different council services that are provided by our local government, by Sheffield City Council, and we're going to recap them. So we're going to see if you can identify what services are provided by our local council, by Sheffield City Council. It's also important to note, confusingly, that sometimes local councils might be referred to as local government, and also local authorities as well, just to kind of confuse it even more. So hopefully now you've got a sheet of paper and you're able to jot down what council services are shown in each photo, the next slide that I'm going to show you. So the pictures I'm going to show you are these, and see if you can jot them down. I'm not going to tell you what the services they are, but see if you can decide what services they are, and we'll talk about them in a second. Beautiful picture there. Something at night that's really useful. Something that you guys might live in fact do live in. A building in the city centre of Sheffield, and it is called Star House on Division Street. Some of you might have walked past it, some of you might use it, and if you don't use it at the moment, then it's open for you to use. A car and someone getting into the car. Now, if you can kind of really squint in the picture, you'll notice there's something written on the car. What is that? And then it looks like there's someone with a clipboard in what looks like a butcher's. What service is this provided by local councils? Jot it down on your sheet. And then a wagon or a lorry with a logo on the side of it. So feel free now to rewind the video and have a little look at some of those pictures if you weren't able to decide what services they were that were provided by the local council. And I'm going to give you some of the answers here. So the first one is an allotment. Some of you guys might have friends or family, or perhaps you know, grandma or granddad who have an allotment. Allotments are places where people can grow vegetables. Really great if you don't have a big garden. The sorts of things that you can rent from the local council. So allotments are something that's provided by the local council. Really great as well, because it allows people to get outdoors, which is a good thing. The next one is street lights. Of course, street lights are all over Sheffield. They're important, aren't they? Because they light the streets so that pedestrians can walk safely at night, but also help make sure that there are fewer traffic collisions and accidents. Houses, some of you thinking perhaps, well, why is it that local councils, or what sort of services do local councils provide in terms of houses? well, they provide council housing for many people. For example, my gran lives in a council house. She will pay rent to the local council in order to live in that council house. Council housing is something that has boomed since the Second World War, with local councils taking on more council houses and building more council houses. And there are lots of estates in Sheffield that have got a large number of council houses as well. You can see this is on Division Street. I said earlier that it's a place that you guys can go to. It's called Star House. It's the headquarters of Sheffield Futures, and Sheffield Futures is a youth organisation that does careers advice and support for young people. Many schools provide a careers advisor, but also does drop-in services for young people, runs things like the youth parliament, elections, gives young people a voice. So basically youth work for people across Sheffield. They also run a variety of different youth clubs. There used to be more youth clubs when I was younger than there perhaps are now. And talking to many of you, I don't think youth clubs are the sorts of things that many of you go to, but they are in some parts of the city. The next one is a cab, a taxi. This is a mini cab. If you squint in, you'll notice that it is an Uber mini cab. Uber is an app-based mini cab provider, quite controversial from some people because they're relatively new into the market. But just like city taxis in Sheffield, Uber in Sheffield are regulated by Sheffield City Council. By regulated, I mean that individual drivers and operators like Uber or City are given licenses to operate, and the local council check to see whether the safety standards are good enough. You wouldn't want to get in a cab, for example, the seatbelts work, or perhaps wasn't a check that was made against the driver to make sure that they didn't have a criminal record, because sometimes they carry quite vulnerable people in these cabs, particularly late at night. So the licensing of taxis is one of the services. Apologies, the picture here is actually behind the other one, but what you should be able to see is it is food hygiene. So local councils give food hygiene certificates. So what you'll notice in takeaways across Sheffield and across the country, actually, a little kind of rating system on the side of takeaways and restaurants, and often it says whether they are 5-star or whether they're 1 or 2-star, for example. If they don't have any star at all, that means that really there are an awful lot of food safety concerns related to that particular establishment, and actually the local council might seek to close them down. You wouldn't want to order from a takeaway or go to a restaurant that didn't kind of look after their customers by making sure that their food is safe, for example. So food safety and trading standards is another service that's provided by local councils, local government. And the last one is bin collection, so refuse collection and recycling is provided by local councils. Confusingly, some services that are provided by local councils and funded by local councils aren't actually provided directly by local councils. We call this outsourcing. And what it means is that the local council services have been outsourced to a different company. And in this case, the company that has the contract to provide the outsourced service that is rubbish collection, refuse collection and recycling in Sheffield is Veolia. So Veolia has the name or their company name on the side of those bin collection wagons, and their staff will be employed by Veolia, not Sheffield City Council, even though Sheffield City Council will be paying the company to provide that particular service. Now, as you go on Sheffield City Council's website, which is sheffield.gov.uk, you'll notice a whole range of services that are provided by Sheffield City Council. I'm just displaying them up on the screen at the moment. You could add those to your list. For example, some schools are operated by Sheffield City Council. Our one isn't because it is an academy, which means that it's independent of local council and is actually accountable to central government in London. But things like parks, things like roads and pavements, libraries, things like public health, which are really important at the moment, the response to COVID-19 and coordinating different organisations and making sure that local residents in Sheffield are safe, monitoring pollution, dealing with people's parking issues, all sorts of things. If you want to find out more about that and supplement your knowledge, you can go to sheffield.gov.uk on the internet. There's another thing that we've covered in lessons, but I want to talk a little bit more deeply about it today. Our local council is run by a leader, and the leader of Sheffield City Council is an elected councillor. It's someone called Julie Dorr. It's not run by a mayor. The mayor that you can see on the screen down here is actually Councillor Tony Downing. Councillor Tony Downing is the Lord Mayor of Sheffield. It's a ceremonial role. It doesn't have any what we would call executive authority, any authority to make decisions about the city. It isn't someone who is directly elected to carry out that role. However, confusingly, we do have a directly elected mayor in Sheffield City region. That's across South Yorkshire, and South Yorkshire is made up of or comprised of Sheffield, Rotherham, Barnsley and Doncaster. And the person who currently has that role as a directly elected mayor is Dan Jarvis. He's in a military uniform there because he was an officer in the British Army, I think. He is our directly elected mayor, so makes decisions about the whole of South Yorkshire as well. Above him, you can see Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan is the Mayor of London, for example. So there are different types of mayors across the country, and each one has a different type of power. Our mayor in Sheffield, as a city, just as a city alone, is, as we said, Councillor Tony Downing. You may know Councillor Tony Downing, but you're quite likely to know the mayor that we had in the previous year, which is Majid, which is this guy in an amazing coloured beret there. Majid was someone just like Tony Downing, who doesn't have any direct power, but was just a ceremonial man. But what I mean by that is they kind of open buildings. They are the first citizen of the city, and they're appointed as a councillor by their fellow councillor to do that ceremonial role. It's quite a big deal because it means that you have to do that almost full time for the whole year. It's a difficult job, and it's difficult to do if you've also got another job at the same time. So often many of these people are retired because it's difficult to do that alongside your day job. One of the last things I want to run you through at the moment is something that the exam board are really keen that you know the difference of. We've talked about councillors, and we talked a little bit about what their role is. Their role is an elected role to make decisions, but we need to understand the difference between a councillor and a council officer. I'm just going to run you through some of those now. In our Show My Homework quiz that you'll be looking at in a short while, this will be specifically mentioned. So it's something to pay attention to at the moment. And feel free to pause this on your screen to get a better understanding. Just going to make it a little bit bigger to help you out with this. So, for example, what you can see on screen now is this is the top picture is Vicky. Vicky is a councillor for Stannington, who many of you may know. Stannington ward on Sheffield City Council includes Loxley, Stannington, High Stores, Dungworth, Bradfield, Low Bradfield, High Bradfield, Worrell, all the sorts of places like that. She's a councillor. She works with 84 other councillors to make decisions about Sheffield. She's elected by the people in her ward to represent them. Most councillors like her are members of political parties. She happens to be in the Liberal Democrat political party. She has a full-time job. The political decisions that she takes are put in place by local government officers. Yeah, so Mark, the person who's underneath her, is a local government officer. And as a local government officer, Mark is paid to work for the council and implement the political decisions made by councillors like Vicky. They're not elected individuals, which means that usually their jobs last longer than councillors, and they're there to advise councillors on the decisions that are made. And it's important that they are impartial. What we mean by that is that they don't favour one political party or the other. Their job is to offer advice, and quite specialist advice about maybe roads or schools or that sort of thing, to local councillors. And they're not meant to kind of favour either the Labour Party or the Liberal Democrats or the Green Party or the Conservatives or whatever else. They're meant to be impartial in their decision making. So feel free to pause that screen if you want to look over it more in order to answer the Show My Homework quiz that you'll be doing in a short while. Now, the last thing that I want you to be thinking about is the information that is on the screen at the moment. The information on the screen at the moment will also be distributed to you on Show My Homework. I'd like you to have a little read through this information, and it just summarises some of the work that we've done on local government and local democracy in general. It talks about the role of local councillors and the distinction between local councillors and council officers. This is on Show My Homework, and it'll allow you to be able to answer the quiz at the end of our session today. So in summation today, thank you very much for spending time watching this video, and thank you very much for persevering with me. This is the first time I've been given an opportunity to kind of have a little look at some of this technology to do it with you today. So keep well, and thank you, and lovely to see you all. Bye-bye.